Sang Knight transformed into his real body, revealing his sharp fangs with toxins. This matter has nothing to do with others. If you want to take revenge, come at me. The Feather Clan swarmed up. Their faces were gloomy. They planned to attack from both sides. Their aim was to make Sonya's life worth a life. Sang hissed at the Feather Clan, but even that didn't help. The natural enemy of snakes is the Feather Clan, not to mention the fact that they are outnumbered. I watched this scene with a cold sweat on my back. At this point, I felt very alarmed and shouted for Song Yao. The moment I went forward, Dai reached out and stopped me. Don't go over. It's too dangerous. But in my heart, I was still worried. Sang Ye's attack power is high, but the other party is a feather tribe can fly fast. Sang Ye doesn't have any advantages. In the moment when I was in a daze, Sang Yi was scratched by the claws of the feathered race, and Sang Yi's straight body shrank back. I turned my head and questioned the two people standing behind me. Can you help Sang Yi? They didn't want to talk to me, but the two of them look like they have nothing to do with it. I sat very helpless. These two guys do not want to get involved in this matter at all. At this moment, my face was very ugly. I sighed helplessly. I never thought that the two of them would ignore it like this. Then I turned around and ran towards Sang Knight. I was very angry at what the two of them were doing. If you don't go, I'll go. Right. Dai looked at me and ran towards Sang Yi. His face was a little sad, but he was more worried about my safety. Frost clouds of the clan are persuade me, but I simply do not listen to persuasion. Straight ran over. They had to shout, "Do not hurt slow." The Feather Clan, who was hovering in the sky, saw my figure, and he gave orders to the clansmen on the ground. Quickly stop that female. At that moment, Sang Knight transformed into a human body with a snake's tail, and he stared at me with his body full of wounds. Still worrying about why I came over, Sang Knight directly stretched out his snake tail and rolled me up. When I was rolled up, I was very surprised. I was pulled to his side by Sang Knight. He had a nervous face. "What are you doing over here? It's dangerous here. Do you know that?" At that moment, the Feather Clan behind us attacked us. Sonya sensed the movement behind us, but warned me to be careful. He protected me in his arms, preventing the Feather Clan from harming me, and I saw the sharp claws piercing Sonya's back. Sonya was only protecting me. He didn't know how to fight back, letting the Feather Tribe hurt him. I looked at Sonya in front of me. I was very worried about him. At this time, the White Emperor and Frost Cloud could not stand it any longer, and blocked the Feather Clan's attack, and shouted at the Feather Clan in the sky. They couldn't bear it a bit. They opened their mouths and cursed. "This is the feud between our Feather Clan and the Snake Beast. Don't meddle in it. Get lost." Frosty Cloud was even angrier when he heard this. "In the territory of the Rockwolf clan, whatever happens is my business. Beware of pulling out all your bird feathers." The Feather Clan's clansmen looked at them and cocked on the sidelines. "This is indeed the tribe of the Wild Eating Wolf clan, so don't be too reckless." Frost Cloud's clan members also stepped in to defend their clan leader. "Whoever dares to touch our clan leader, we will kill him." In this way, the Feather Clan didn't dare to make any more mistakes. Their faces were gloomy, and they could only let this matter end, even though they had all sorts of unwillingness in their hearts. Subsequently, the Feather Clan chief with his own people, Oiling Wings, all fly away. The Wolf Clan also did not expect, so quickly couldn't be resolved. At this time, the Frost Cloud is very dissatisfied. "Rocky Mountain is our territory. Want to live here? How to ask me as the master." After Frosty Cloud finished his anger, he turned his head towards his clan members and ordered them to pick a few powerful orcs and go up to the top of the mountain together to meet their leader. The White Emperor was looking at me and Sang Yi, and if his eyes could kill, I think Sang Yi would have died in his hands long ago. I didn't care about Bai Dai's gaze. I took out a bandage directly from my body. I could only give Sang Knight an emergency bandage first. Bai Dai looked at this scene. His face was very ugly. The atmosphere around him was like an ice cellar, making people feel ashamed of themselves. I looked at in order to save me, and was seriously injured Sang Knight. I feel very guilty. I can only take him back to recuperate first. At this moment, Bai Dai clenched his fist tightly and questioned me viciously. "Slowly, remember what you promised." I felt very confused and lowered my head helplessly. I remembered what I promised Bai Dai, but I can't leave Sang Yu behind. When I turned my head to look at Sang Yu, leaning against a tree with scars all over his body, he was cowering and didn't dare to look back at me. I stared at him with mixed emotions. He is like this now. I have to take him back. If you want to punish me afterwards, I'll accept it. White Emperor stared back at me with a gloomy face. He couldn't do anything about me. He didn't say anything, but in his heart he still cared about me very much. Just like that, Bai Dai directly turned around and left. Now he is probably very disappointed in me. I shouted behind him, but he didn't turn around. I looked at the direction Bai Dai left. He did not give me any opportunity to explain. Bai Dai angry. He has never been like this. In his mind, I'm just a bad female, I guess. I stood alone. The face of Bai Dai was always in my mind. Song Ya suddenly called out to me. That's when I came back to my senses. I hurriedly reminded Song Ya that I hadn't bandaged up yet. Don't move. Afterwards, I picked up the bandage and wrapped the wound. Sang-yi was shocked when he noticed my trembling hands. When he turned his head back in surprise, he saw me with an aggrieved look on my face. At that moment, I couldn't hold back my tears. Sang-yi looked at me gently. You go back with them. The injuries on your body are simply fine. In fact, you don't need to be so torn up about it. I unconsciously sniffled. My eyes contained tears. It's none of your business. It's me who didn't handle it well. Can you still walk? He heard what I said and nodded. He got up and tidied up his clothes. I looked at him and my tears flowed down again. I assisted Sang-yi, walking towards the road home. I will take good care of you until the wound heals, as a compensation for my breach of trust. Sung-yu turned his head and looked at me with deep emotion. He didn't need my compensation. Of course I knew what he meant. I then did not answer his words. He thought in his heart, there is a sentence he cannot say, so already very sad, cannot let her be embarrassed. Just as I was walking forward with Sang Night, Frosty Cloud suddenly stood in front of us, blocking our way, so I was in a difficult position. Frosty Cloud stared at me with a gloomy face. You promised not to bring him into our family home. I was very helpless. Explained to him seriously. This is what I owe him. Must personally pay him back. Otherwise I will be upset in my life. After hearing my words, Frosty Cloud was very annoyed. You are the head of the family. Everything is at your disposal. Okay. Then he left. I brought Sang-yi to our house. I took the herbs and put them on his wound very carefully. But Song-ya's eyes stayed on me. This is Slow's home. Clean and warm. And Slow scent. I stared at him with my lovely eyes and asked Song-ya seriously, why did you hurt the Feather Clan's cubs? Sang Night, however, had a disdainful face. There was no reason, but I believe in his character. He wouldn't hurt the cubs for no reason. There must be a reason for it. At this point, Sang-yi smiled bitterly. I'm the first person who is willing to believe him and still want to listen to his explanation. Song-ya recalled that when he was injured before, he was walking alone in the snow. No one was willing to believe him. He was forced to flee the temple. He was forced to run away from the temple, and he had long been used to being disliked and isolated by the people he had been displaced by, and by the people he had fled to avoid being hunted. It wouldn't have been so bad if he'd been living in exile. But he met me, and I shone into his life like a ray of light. I was thrilled when I realized that he was trying to protect the vegetable patch and the fruit grove, and that's why he hurt the cub. Sang-yo is a honest person. He would not do anything to harm the world. They not only do not feel guilty about stealing food, but also maliciously destroy my orchard. I looked at him with glowing eyes. Your intentions are good. If it wasn't for you, the vegetables and fruit trees in the field would have been ruined. It's those with the people who are to blame, who told them to steal. But I'm a little puzzled by Sang Night's words. I forgot that this is a world of orcs. It's not uncommon for them to kill their rivals for food and to fight for territory. I got up and looked at Song-ya. I'll go find you some food. In the large cave, only Sang-yi was left alone. He was sitting quietly at the table. At this moment, a flying bird flew by outside, making a screeching sound. However, Bai Dai was sitting by the stream, listening to the slow flow of the stream, and his mood didn't improve. Bai Dai stroked the ring finger of his left hand. That's the couple's ring he wore with me. At this moment, Frosty Cloud came over and looked at Bai Dai sitting on the ground. He was furious. The sun is going down. You still don't go home. He looked at the silent Bai Dai and shouted angrily, That's enough. If you don't stop, I'll kick you out of the house. Bai Dai slightly lowered his head, turning the ring on his ring finger. Slowly really cared about that snake beast. At this moment, the White Emperor looked at the Frost Cloud gloomy face. The still slow to shear half of you is already my limit of tolerance. Frost Cloud sitting on the ground is very angry. This matter is our say. Today we chased away a snake beast. What about tomorrow? Can we stop it? Both of them fell into silence at the same time. Frosty Cloud cursed Bai Dai in his heart. He didn't say anything again. This tiger is really yin-yang strange. Frosty Cloud remembered how slow she was. Her character was too soft. Whoever treated her a little better, she couldn't help but return the favor to the other person. Bai Dai heard Frosty Cloud's advice to him and felt physically and mentally exhausted. How easy it is to change someone. At this time, Frosty Cloud turned his head, The corners of his mouth rose slightly. He does not want me to change. Let me be myself is the best choice. Because Frosty Cloud, he likes me to be soft and easy to be soft. I also use this to pin him down. By Dai also recognize his idea. If I become selfish and self-centered, just like those females who are only utilitarian, I won't be the same person I was in the beginning. At this time, the confusion in the heart of the White Emperor finally got the answer. I usually rough and tumble, think quite thoroughly. Frost Cloud stood up with a big smart face. Otherwise his face was gloomy. He felt that I was not an ordinary female. These words of the White Emperor was very surprised. He did not expect. Frost Cloud actually also perceived this point. Frosty Cloud remembered how I seriously dressed up, as if I didn't belong to their world at all. His face was a bit embarrassed. He always had a premonition that a lot of unusual things will happen in the future slowly. Frosty Cloud turned his head to look at Bai Dai. If more and more powerful enemies appear in the future, can we rely on the two of us to protect slowly? He thought that I don't even have the ability to protect myself now. He was very worried that they, for their own selfish desires, they will treat my safety without regard. Frosty Cloud suddenly stood up. Nothing can be more important than the safety of Slowly. He can accept the other male beasts to protect me together. Bai Dai clenched his fist tightly. Frosty Cloud was right. Slowly is special. Her kind of physique will attract countless covets. He strongly agreed with Frosty Cloud. What if she gets hurt because of possessiveness? They need more helpers to protect to slow down. At this time, Bai Dai kissed the ring in his hand. The main thing is to become stronger yourself to be able to protect Slowly. Bai Dai's face was gloomy, but his eyes were firm. Slowly, we will definitely protect you well. At night time, Bai Dai returned to the cave. Outside the cave to watch the slow and serious cutting meat, Bai Dai quietly walked in and hugged me from behind. He reached out and grabbed the knife in my hand, intending to cut the meat. At this time, my body involuntarily trembled. My heart was very sad. He sensed that I was not right. His face was panicked, and he hurriedly asked me what was wrong, but I didn't know how to explain. Seeing that I didn't make a reply, Bai Dai directly reached out to hold my shoulders and turn me around. When I turned around, my tears snapped and fell. Aggrieved, inquiring him, "You're not angry anymore?" Whitey was puzzled as to how he could be crying like this. Me, I hugged Bai Dai and cried loudly. At this point, Bai Dai patiently calmed me down. He would never be angry with me. He saw that I care about Sonia and ran out to calm down. He reached out and wiped my tears. I choked and explained to him that I have you and Frosty Cloud now, and that's enough for me. I followed that up with, I'll talk things over with Sanyo when he's healed from his injuries. Bai Dai looked at me and got in a much better mood. He knew I was worried about his emotions. He didn't forget to pacify me, but I didn't expect it. But Bai Dai said there was no hurry to send Sang Night away. I was really surprised when the words came out of his mouth. I questioned him doubtfully, but he took care of my feelings. Let Sonia stay for some more time. After all, he saved you. Hearing these words, I was in a very surprised mood. Bai Dai's attitude is strange. Obviously so resistant before. How that attitude changed. I was so excited that I hugged Bai Dai. As long as Bai Dai was not angry, I was really afraid that Bai Dai would be angry and leave me. Bai Dai looked at me in his arms. His heart is very happy. His slow do not need to know the cruel reality. Just need to be happy and safe is good. At this time, the White Emperor felt the cave Sang Night. He said that it did not mind. His eyes are still very honest glare at him. He grimaced and didn't say anything, but in his heart, he was playing with his mind. As for the rest, let him take care of it. Sanyi also glared back. The two made eye contact. This quiet battlefield, hidden a huge storm. The next morning, the sun was just peeking out. It was a sunny day and the mood was very pleasant. Frosty Cloud sprinted over from outside the cave, grimly shouting, "I'm starving. Are we going to eat?" I sat at the table, looking at the food on the table, in a very happy mood, thinking that there were more people. The table could finally be used. But when they sat at the table, I felt that the atmosphere here was very depressing. The air pressure was cold and creepy. This is simply a charade. Suddenly, the White Emperor spoke out to break the deadlock, asking Frosty Cloud how the Feather Clan side was doing. Frost Cloud holding food is not eaten. He is very annoyed. The Feather Tribe leader injured cannot show up. There is no talk. He was very angry and cursed. He knew that that group of bird people are not good things. At this time, I also told him the cause of the incident. Seeing this, Bai Dai handed me a bunch of meat. Don't just eat vegetables and talk. Eat more meat. Song Ya looked at Bai Dai competing for favor and felt speechless towards him. At this time, Song Ya also envied the way they got along. If only he could have met Slowly earlier and become her mate as well. Song Ya looked at me bringing over a big pot of meat. and never thought that this was for him to eat. I smiled and just looked at Song Ye, telling him that all these meats were delicious and I wanted him to taste them. Song Ye picked up a skewer of meat and took a big bite out of it. It was the most delicious meat he had ever eaten. Bai Dai looked at me, directly poking through my thoughts. I turned my head sheepishly, not wanting to meet his eyes. I looked at Song Yu awkwardly, wanting to find a topic to turn this matter over. I then handed it to Song Yu. Song Ye chewed the food very carefully. The lotus leaves were much more delicious than the ones he had eaten before. He ate the vegetables I personally grew. His heart was very excited. Song Yu's good behavior, people think it's adorable. The next day, Sang Yi unwrapped the gauze from his body and realized that all his wounds had healed. But he wasn't in a very happy mood. It turned out that Song Yu had been reluctant to leave me and was looking for a reason to stay by my side, so he scratched his body a few times. At that moment, Frosty Cloud came behind him and shouted, "Don't be lazy when you're healed. Get down to work." Hearing these words, Song Yu was very surprised. They are not unwilling to leave me behind. Frost Cloud and not a little good face. Pick up the clothes thrown to him. We are not willing, but Slow is the head of the family. Even if you are not happy, you can only hold your nose and admit it. Hearing this, Sang Yi hurriedly put on his clothes and attentively ran to work in the field. Frost Cloud's clansmen looked at Sang Yi's irrigation method and were surprised. They had never thought that Sang Nai would manifest his real body and directly spray water out of his mouth to irrigate these vegetables. Every cabbage on the ground was evenly irrigated. Frost Cloud see this scene. Harkon not praise. This guy watering efficiency is really high. Can be called a masterpiece. He was very excited and shouted, "Half a day to finish watering, Sang Night just a few minutes enough. So powerful." Song Ye turned his head and saw Frosty Cloud, who praised him, and said he was a bit speechless. He was watering hard, while Frosty Cloud, who was staring at him with glowing eyes, even watered my vegetable plot. By the afternoon, Sang Yi had watered all the vegetable plots of the orcs. The Rockwolf clan members, looking at the crystal clear cabbages, lamented in their hearts. All of them were watered. This big snake is really too powerful. At this time, Frosty Cloud, to Sang Night committed nymphomania. "We are going to go hunting in the afternoon. Do you want to go with us?" Sang Night was very surprised. Never met an orc who was so enthusiastic about him. How should he choose? Just as he frowned, a sound of footsteps came from behind Song Ye. We persuaded him to go together. Bai Dai and I walked up and looked at Sang Yi seriously. Sang Yi was a bit incredulous. At the moment I looked at him with a smile, trying to get Song Ye used to life here. Hunting together is a good start. Sang Night looked at me, smiled at him, and made a choice in his heart to seize this opportunity so that it could stay by my side. At night, some people were chatting while others were sleepy, and I was in the cellar of my house, arranging the harvested fruits. Suddenly my stomach grumbled, be entered by the White Emperor on the side. He took out the fruits to feed me. "This blue fruit is delicious. Try it quickly." I hurriedly opened my mouth and ate the fruit handed over by the White Emperor. It was the most delicious fruit I had ever eaten. At that moment, the White Emperor smiled. My mood was also happy because of him. The White Emperor is not angry. I feel that all things are solved easily. Bai Dai suddenly reached out and wiped the corners of my mouth. His movements were so gentle that it made me feel like my heart was going to jump out of my chest. Just then he leaned down and kissed me softly. Bai Dai's kisses were so gentle and his body wrapped around me so strong. He made me feel the power of the Master Rain. My body could feel the resonance of Bai Dai's heartbeat. Just as I was flirting with Pak Tai, someone was lying on the cellar door and shouted at me in panic. She then said to us, "It's bad. The beasts of the Feather Clan are coming to the door." When we heard this, Bai Dai and I couldn't believe it. Wasn't the clan leader of the Feather Clan injured? At this time, Frost Cloud's clansmen rushed out from the cave entrance with their weapons. The Feather Clan had planned to crouch in the dense forest, flying not far away to check the situation, staring at the rock wolves, always ready to attack. Inside the cave, the rock wolves are standing by. They are talking restlessly. Shortly after White Emperor and I arrived here, White Emperor couldn't help but think, to us, Slow is the new witch doctor of the Rockwolf clan. In the absence of the clan leader, the witch doctor is our chief. At this time, the Feather Clan also flew into the cave. Their expression was not worried. They questioned, "We are here to ask the Rockwolf clan for an explanation." Seeing that they were so aggressive, Bai Dai explained that he was not an animal of the Wolf clan, and that Chief Frosty Cloud was out hunting and would not be back until later. The Feather Clan shouted angrily, "Then call out your witch doctor. Ask your witch doctor to come out. We must give an explanation today." Hearing this, the beasts of the Rockwolf clan looked at me in the center, hoping that I could step forward and solve this problem. When White Emperor saw that they were coming, he just wanted to stand out and say that the witch doctor of the Rockwolf clan was not there before, but I reached out and stopped him. I gently covered my mouth and whispered to Bai Dai, "I'll deal with them," and I stepped forward to explain. "Our old witch doctor sacrificed. Now I temporarily take over as the witch doctor. What do you have to say?" The feathered clan was shocked by my words. They were incredulous and agreed that I was talking nonsense. It was impossible for the witch doctor to be a female. It was unheard of, and didn't believe it. I couldn't help but frown. I was a little upset in my heart. These bird clan orcs are so noisy. Their ideas are simply to backward. The Rockwolf clan people heard this and were unhappy. They stood out with fierce expressions, saying that I was the witch doctor in their hearts. The feather clan was so surprised that they changed back to their beast form. They were shocked that such a small female, who didn't have any fighting ability, was really a witch doctor. They gathered together and muttered, looking like they were discussing some countermeasures. I was a bit puzzled to see. I do not know what they are playing. This completely disrupted the plans of the Feather Clan, originally prepared to be polite before the military, but the Rockwolf clan even sent a small female to negotiate. They can't even say a few words to a female. I can't figure out what they're muttering about, but I just quickly opened my mouth to explain. I've already heard what happened from Sonya. He did hit hard, but your cubs are also at fault. There's no need to rush into action now. When the Frost Cloud group leader returned, we can personally come to the door to apologize. The Feather Clan did not listen at all. One by one their cheeks blushed with embarrassment. They gathered together again to whisper, "The little female is so serious and soft. There is no way to refuse, but so great to go back." Cannot explain to the clansmen. The White Feather tribe thought of one person. He should have a countermeasure. That is, the Blood Plume Elder, the leader of the group, has left all the big and small matters to him to deal with. The other feather tribe heard this person may be a little afraid of Sweatface. Blood Plume Elder has always been temperamental. Do things all depends on personal mood. They recalled just now, also looking for Blood Plume Elder help. The result is not even see the face of Blood Plume Elder was pushed in, dragged away. Their expressions were a bit serious, gritting their teeth, thinking that the clan leader could not come out. The Blood Plume Elders could not be relied on. They had no choice but to come to the door. But I didn't expect that the Rockwolf clan was simply despicable, and even sent a small female as a shield. The Feather clan's expression was ferocious as they stared at the beastmen in the distance. Rockwolf clan see them like this, also fears glare back. The two clans do not give way to each other. Constantly I war, intersection between the four flames. Just at this time, not far away from there, suddenly came a majestic voice. Rockwolf tribe, since they want to apologize, must come up with sincerity. Feather tribe beasts heard this familiar voice, have turned their heads to look over, stunned eyes wide, expression surprised. I didn't expect that it was in a came, only to see that the person who came had a pair of fiery red wings, white and slender hands, and a head of golden yellow hair, simply heavenly godlike perfect appearance. He was carrying heavy accessories, and his clothes were obviously much more advanced than the other feathered races. I naturally also heard the commotion. I couldn't help but look up and frown in place, sighing in my heart, why are his wings so big? The Blood Plume looked down at me. I don't know when. That air slowly fell down a feather. I frowned and reached out to pick up this beautiful feather. Did not think that even the feathers are so big. Then their own two hands together are big. When the other beastmen of the feather tribe saw the visitor, they were all surprised. They opened their mouths wide in disbelief and shouted in surprise at the Blood Plume Elder. I heard this name, can't help but be a little puzzled. This person is an elder, and continued to look up towards the person in the air, constantly measuring him. Blood Plume flew in the air. His body was shining. I did not raise my head to search around. It turned out to be the decorations on his body. Under the sun's rays, they emitted a beautiful light. These decorations were all inlaid with red crystals, and I stared at them with glowing eyes. I didn't notice his looks at all, and when I saw those ornaments, he was simply extravagant. I stared at his hair ornaments in aggravation. Inwardly, I was saddened by the fact that my efforts to grow so many vegetables were not enough to make the red crystals on his hair chain worth my. The gap between the rich and the poor in this be. Blood Plume noticed my unusual reaction. He slightly raised an eyebrow. This little female has been staring at my clothes and hair. Really interesting, But then he returned to the topic. If you're not sincere, don't delay. If you have any grudges, settle them once and for all. I forced myself to leave the line of sight, but cannot look at it again. If I look at it again, I want to rob. I turned my head serious and said, in addition to apologies, can also give you a certain amount of compensation. Heard this sentence to go to the Blood Plume should be down. We lost a cub. You return a cubs. This is even if the matter on the past. I did not think it would be so unreasonable. Expression shocked shouted. How is this going to? The feathered tribe on the sidelines to watch with great interest, and constantly behind the encouragement to cheer. Blood Plume elders are really great, fast and hard to dislike them. Blood Plume did not pay the slightest attention to the words of the clansman behind him. He had his own intentions, just gently smiling, eyes deep staring at me. Then he quickly lowered himself closer and slowly uttered a shocking sentence. Mate with him and give birth to a cub for him. Wouldn't that be a cub of the Feather Clan? I couldn't help but stare in shock, looked up and frowned at him, and couldn't help but think to myself, before I only noticed the jewelry clothing material. Until now, I did not realize that this feathered man looked so gorgeous and beautiful, just like a phoenix. Is he courting with himself? And then the feathered people have face-to-face vegetables. Heart coincidentally think, Blood Plume elder you are talking about. Want to reach out to stop but do not dare to. Only to see the Blood Plume is still their narcissist said. Ow, is not happy stupid? I woke up suddenly, angry teeth gnashing. Shame and anger at the Blood Plume angrily shouted, you do not want to. The White Emperor is standing behind me. See me angry but so gently soothing. Slowly calm down. Do not get angry. But the Blood Plume is immersed in his world. Said just now I stared at him hot. Clearly is in love with him. So the initiative to propose. I don't understand why I refused. I was even more furious. Opened my mouth and fiercely scolded him for his arrogance, thinking that looking at a crystal stone was misunderstood. Blood Lane but spread his hands. Really a mouth is not the heart of the little female. I was angry, body shivering. I have never seen such a shameless person. Seeing that I couldn't explain myself, I quickly made my position clear. I have no interest in you. If you really want to be a couple, I can introduce other females of the Wolf Clan. The Blood Plume spoke with a faint expression. He doesn't see other females, and said that he only has eyes for me. When I heard these amazing words from him, I was instantly shocked, and couldn't help but pull the corners of my mouth speechlessly, my face darkening down. At this time, outside the Rocky Wolf Clan's cave, the atmosphere between the Feather Clan and the Wolf Clan's beastmen was very awkward. Instantly all fell silent, speechless for a moment. When the Feather Clan orcs heard these amazing words, cold sweat couldn't help but slide down from their foreheads. They thought in horror, is the elder going to directly declare war? I was so angry that I couldn't stop trembling, gritting my teeth and thinking, this is really hateful. The orc's outlook does not exist this value of modesty. If this is put in modern times, it is a big pervert who was arrested into the police station. But this big pervert is still talking narcissistically. Is not it happy to be bad? The people of the Feather Clan can help but quietly complain that the oldest bachelor of the Feather Clan would even fall in love with a female and openly asked for her hand in love. The sun has come out of the west today. I really can't stand this arrogant attitude. I want to punch him with my clenched fists, but Bai Dai blocked in front of me, seriously opened his mouth to warn, please don't tease slowly anymore. She doesn't like to be joked about like this. But the Blood Plume simply could not listen to other words, but also looked serious to say, slow, this name is good. I like it. Immediately after he snorted a laugh. He himself does not feel that this is a joke yet. I gritted my teeth and thought angrily, good to hear a ghost, a old rogue. Bai Dai then realized that he might be genuinely interested in pursuing. His brows couldn't help but frown slightly. His expression was serious as he opened his mouth to question him. Blood Ling gently licked his lips. Of course it is serious. So tender and delicious little female. He is still the first time to see it. Hearing his flirting one after another, I was about to be furious, but I could only hide behind the White Emperor, glaring at him with a ferocious expression. Blood Plume stared at me with deep eyes, especially when he was angry, like a small wild cat with open teeth and claws, so cute that he wanted to cut off his claws. Raised in a cage forever, Bai Dai's face darkened when he heard his words. So let's fight. Only if you win Bai Dai will you have a chance. When I heard this, I looked panicked and blocked. Don't fight with him. This Blood Plume is not an ordinary orc at first glance. If you really fight with him, Bai Dai will definitely get hurt. I looked at him with worry, but Bai Dai just touched my head. Don't worry, it will be fine. I wanted to say something else, but Bai Dai gently cupped my face and seriously said that I must fight him. This is the rule between male beasts. Bai Dai looked at me with a serious look, his eyes overflowing with deep love, trying to make me believe him, and then let go of his hand immediately after. I was so sad that I was about to cry, watching him walk towards the direction of the Blood Plume. I couldn't help thinking that this is the beast world, and the so-called battles. It's true that there will be casualties, but I can't stop Bai Dai, because he went to fight to protect me. Blood Plume saw him walk over, and also walked in the direction of Bai Dai. His expression was imperative. So let's fight. Bai Dai's expression quickly sank. His voice threatened fiercely. Only by winning this fight will they have a chance to stay by the side of slowly The words just fell, was about to rush up. Suddenly appeared a luxuriant jade hand, tugged the corner of the White Emperor's clothing. Bai Dai turned his head in confusion. Did not expect me to come over? I cried so much that my body is shaking. Worried to look at him. You must be careful. The voice is full of panic. If you really can't beat, you admit defeat. The hand is still dead, tugging on the corner of his coat. The White Emperor saw me like this. He couldn't help but sigh, and then looked at me with a smile. He hadn't even made a move yet. Why did he think that he would lose? I couldn't hear his words. I rushed forward and hugged him tightly around the waist. I don't care about the matter between the male and the beast. I don't care if I win or lose. I only hope you can be safe. White Emperor did not expect me to say such words, lowered his head and looked seriously. I will listen to you. At this time, standing aside, the blood plume has long been unable to hold back. Looking at the two people in front of me, this black and heavy in front of me to putty, really unpleasant. Fierce export provocation. Really a long time no one dares to challenge him. Really courageous. Let you a hand and do not use wings. Then he intended to put away his wings, but the White Emperor saw his face, stared at him without expression, and refused. No need. Immediately after that, Bai Dai's whole body glowed with blue light, staring at Blood Plume with a serious expression, and in an instant, he transformed back into his original body. It was a huge silver-white tiger. Shaking off its fur, it took a step in the direction of Blood Plume. Let's go to war. Then it pounced on Blood Plume, but Blood Plume's expression was so easy to read. He stood still and was about to hit him. The rocky wolves on the side of the orcs are nervously observing the battle. Their expressions have been shocked. I did not think that he actually do not dodge away. White Emperor's eyes fierce pounced up, immediately about to touch him, but the Blood Plume in place instantly disappeared. Then quickly flashed, even came to the White Emperor's back. How it instantly moved here. Really incredible. When I saw this scene, I was immediately worried for Bai Dai, panicked and shouted at the top of my voice, "He is behind you." White Emperor heard the voice, quickly turned back, but it was too late. His expression could not help but be a little shocked. He disappeared without realizing it, and appeared behind him. Blood Plume flew in the air, gathered a flame in his hand, and then violently threw it at Bai Dai. The small group of flames even instantly expanded countless times, gathering a ball of fire fiercely towards the White Emperor. The White Emperor simply couldn't dodge in time. The scorching flames instantly burned his fur, and he let out a painful wail and fell to the ground in pain. There was a large burn on his back, and it was still burning his fur. Seeing this scene, my expression was horrified as I shouted for Bai Dai, but the clan reminded me that females cannot intervene in a duel between male beasts. This is the rule. I shook off the clansmen who tried to stop him and shouted angrily, "I don't care about the rules. In my heart, Bai Dai's safety is the most important thing." Blood Plume, not far away from the hands of the gathering a flame, see me like this, also opened his mouth to remind. The weak is the law of nature. He put away the flame in his hand. Since your mate can't protect you, you should get rid of them and look for a stronger male to be your mate. I rushed forward, hugged Bai Dai tightly, and fiercely warned Blood Plume that Bai Dai was not weak. He was very strong, but Bai Dai knew in his own heart that he couldn't be defeated, so he trembled and supported himself, trying hard to stand up. Eventually he stood up and walked in the direction of Blood Plume. I saw him like this and couldn't help but cry out. My eyes were filled with heartache. Bai Dai didn't say a word. His eyes unexpectedly exploded with a blue-violet light. I was shocked to see this look of Bai Dai. Frowned. In my heart I couldn't help but be a little puzzled. Bai Dai's pupils actually emit electric light. But at this moment, I felt something wrong on my body, and blinked with some pain. How hot on the waist. So Strange lowered his head to look at his waist, shocked to find that there is a large tattoo there. Surprisingly, there is a large tattoo there is still constantly emitting light. This in the end what is going on. This is the White Emperor star tattoo. But how can this appear in my body? At this time, Bai Dai's whole body was haunted by many electric lights, crackling between the intersection. He walked leisurely towards the Blood Plume. Seeing him walking towards him, Blood Plume frowned, somewhat shocked to find that he was actually about to advance, and he had also stimulated the lightning attribute. But the White Emperor didn't even talk nonsense to him. He just opened his big fangs and his eyes glowed as he lunged towards him. Seeing that a palm was about to ruthlessly slap on his body, Blood Plume hurriedly and panickedly darted upwards to avoid it. Afterwards, the two of them quickly pulled away from each other, and that palm of Bai Dai's just now unexpectedly smashed the ground out of a huge crater. Blood Plume couldn't help but look serious. He frowned fiercely, incredibly thought, even have such a powerful destructive force. The White Emperor's momentum did not decrease, followed by another flying attack towards him as it jumped, constantly using lightning to launch attacks. Blood Plume quickly opened his wings behind him, dodging away from the strike. His attack was too fierce. He could only passively dodge it himself. He was so fierce that he could only passively dodge it, but he had no power to counterattack. The white flaps kept fluttering and jumping, and the lightning crackled on his body. Blood Plume's expression was serious, incredibly realizing that this person's strength was actually still climbing upwards. He had never seen such a thing before. He could not let him grow any further. If he dragged on like this, he would have no chance of winning. He had to fight quickly. He gathered a ball of flame in his hand. He stretched out his hand and threw a ball of flame, violently threw it at Bai Dai, only to see Bai Dai not even dodge, calmly stood in the same place. He had a backhand. When the flame was about to arrive, he opened his mouth violently and shot out a large beam of electricity from his mouth. With a bang, the blue and red colors converged, both of them emitting a huge power. They were equal in strength to each other. The beasts on the other side suffered, caught unawares by the immense fight. A pile of debris flew to their side. But I am only worried about the White Emperor, always concerned about him. See, his situation is not right. Worried about him, shouted. When the smoke cleared, I saw another burn on Bai Dai's body, and the wound was on his abdomen. Bai Dai's steps were a bit unsteady. His body swayed, but he still barely maintained his sanity. He walked forward with weak steps. He was still ready to continue to meet the battle. He could not fall. Blood Plume did not expect him to be injured like this, but still insisting on it. Some admired him, but had to admit that he had lost, because he had just used his wings. Against his own words, the feathered people on the side were a bit unbelievable. Just now, Elder Blood Plume used his wings in order to avoid the fireball that exploded. So the Elder had lost. They thought incredulously. The most powerful Elder Blood Plume also had a day to lose. This was even more surprising than him finding the female of his choice. Blood Plume's eyes looked deeply at Bai Dai. He was silent for a while and eventually gave in. He recognized what I just said. Blood Plume turned slightly and looked at them sideways. You are right. Your mate is indeed very strong. It is he himself who has taken the enemy lightly. Then he quickly flew away without further entanglement. The Rocky Wolf beastmen underneath watched in shock as it flew away. The feather people also did not expect the elders just left. Then they also have to quickly withdraw. Had to go back to think of other ways? Soon, the feathered tribe of beastmen also quickly flew away, intending to return to their own nest. A group of people just left. The beastmen of the Rockwolf clan were overjoyed. They kept shouting excitedly, "We won! Bai Dai is so great!" White Emperor and I naturally saw this scene. I gently stroked White Earth fur, and also felt a little surprised that they had all left. So I happily raised my head to talk to him, and just as I excitedly shouted out to him, I saw Bai Dai continuously panting heavily. His condition was not right, and beads of sweat were beading on his face, and his body began to shake. Soon he quickly changed back to his human form, but he couldn't support himself and passed out. I was looking at him with concern, and just before I could move forward to support him, he fell to the ground with a loud thud and couldn't hold on any longer. He let out a thud and could no longer hold on. His body was full of wounds from the flames, and he was already delirious. I anxiously shouted at him, but he didn't wake up at all. The sight of his body, I anxiously called out to him, but I couldn't wake up at all. The clansmen rushed here and anxiously asked what was wrong. I looked very panicked and shouted, "Quickly, carry Bai Dai back to heal his wounds." A few orcs rushed to carry him back to the cave. It was hard to put him on the stone bed. I carefully surveyed the wounds on Bai Dai's body. I did not expect that he had suffered such a serious injury. He didn't even say a word until Blood Plume left. I reached out my hand and came, but I didn't dare to touch his wounds. Eyes full of heartache, panicked some of the 6 gods, helplessly running around in the cave. Should first bandage the wound, looking for antiseptic wine. I found a piece of white cloth, but my hands were shaking. I didn't dare to touch him for fear of hurting him. I looked at his unconscious face and shouted in a trembling voice, "Whitey, wake up. Don't leave me alone." I kept saying, "Don't leave me alone. I'm really scared." I couldn't stop the tears from flowing down. My voice was full of helplessness and fear. "I don't need you to be the strongest. I don't need you to fight for me." I was so sad. Tears like broken beads, continuously dripping down on Bai Dai's cheeks. My mouth constantly broken. "As long as you stay by my side. Don't leave me." I was crying very sadly. A tear suddenly fell down on Bai Dai's injured position. Just then, there was a sudden change. In front of my eyes, a blue-green light erupted, and the star pattern at the waist and abdomen of the White Emperor really kept flashing with light. At this time I was not even aware of it. I was still crying sadly, tears dripping down. The light reflected on my face, slowly surrounded me and the White Emperor, in which the scene is very mysterious. The light fell on Bai Dai's wound. In the next second, the wound was slowly healing. What the hell is going on? I slightly opened my eyes. My eyes are still a little confused. Tears involuntarily slipped down. Surprised to find the scene in front of me. The wounds were actually slowly disappearing. In the blink of an eye, all that was left of Bai Dai's body was some small marks. This is really unbelievable. I sat frowning on the edge of the bed thinking, only to realize that it wasn't an illusion, that the burns on half of my chest were actually able to disappear completely. At that moment, the White Emperor suddenly opened his eyes, and this subtle movement was seen by me as if I had not been looking, so I flung myself into the man's warm embrace, little teardrops seeming to fall from the corners of my eyes, and my tender little white face rubbing against his pecs. I had absolutely no idea what to say, and could only call out to my lover, Whitey, over and over again, while inside I quietly sighed in relief. Whitey's long, slender fingers stroked my hair, and his uniquely male, magnetic voice rang out above him as he said he'd always been. I raised my head in pity to look at him. You finally woke up. I was so afraid that you wouldn't wake up again. There was a momentary gleam of dissimulation in his features, but he soon covered it up with ease. He wiped my tears gently, and I leaned against him for safety, and a sudden feeling of affection rose between us. But without waiting for Bai Dai's next move, staggering voices came from outside the door. It seemed that Frost Cloud and the others had returned. Frost Cloud and the others hurried to the cave entrance, hearing that the White Emperor had been injured and how he was doing. Bai Dai didn't even wait for my reply. He directly revealed his fine pectoral muscles and said in an extremely flat tone that it was fine. Frost Cloud scuffled up to them. He kept looking up and down at the White Emperor's wounds, and he really did find something. I didn't expect Bai Dai to advance to a four-star soul beast. Didn't they say he was seriously injured? Seeing that there was no way to hide it, Bai Dai had to tell them that he was indeed injured. But when he woke up, all the wounds on his body had disappeared. A flash of shock flashed within Sang Knight's expression. It sounded like a healing spell had been cast on him. At this point, it was the three of us who were confused, and we all looked back at him with a great deal of puzzlement and longing for him to show us the way. Healing is a secret technique unique to the temple. With the power of the gods, it can help orcs heal their wounds and restore their health in a short period of time. The instructions were lost in my head. I didn't realize this thing was so amazing. The so-called healing magic relies on sucking the life force out of plants to heal orcish wounds. Sang Knight, however, suddenly became incredibly serious, and in the end, it was an overbearing means of plundering for the purpose of administering cures to the privileged classes. If the plants don't have enough life force, the temple uses slaves as sacrifices to suck the life force out of them. But he's not going to tell us that. The White Emperor, however, did not squint, slightly frowned. Can know the inner workings of the healing art of the orcs. Sang Knight is not related to the Timberwood. The thought came to him with some irritation. After all, no one wanted to live with such an orc. Little Frosty Cloud suddenly asked to the point. But I've been with the White Emperor the whole time, and didn't really know what it was all about. I had to remember what happened before again, just crying and bandaging him up, and then the wound miraculously healed, which no one would believe. Right, the White Emperor held my small hand directly. Was there anything unusual about his body as his wounds healed? There was a slight hesitation in my gaze, and I could only state uncertainly that I smelled grass and trees. Frosty Cloud and Bai Dai looked at each other noncommittally, and the two of them searched for answers in each other's eyes. The time soon came to night, and the stars in the sky twinkled with a faint light. However, the White Emperor and the two of them suddenly walked to me and gently reminded me that the rapid healing of my wounds should have something to do with me. Frost Cloud also nodded approvingly from the back as he stated that the divine wood seeds in my body could make the orc's wounds heal in a short period of time. But this metaphysical thing I do not believe. The White Emperor directly changed the white tiger's paw. He personally tried it on the line. He cut his arm straight open with a big gash, but the sight made me cry out with a tear in my heart. The fool's wound was just healed. These bruises and cuts did stir up the pain inside me again. Are you crazy to cut so deep? The corners of my eyes were suddenly filled with countless more teardrops, and they gradually dripped down my cheeks. These tears that dripped down on Bai Dai's wrist actually helped to heal off really quickly. Frost Cloud broke out into a few drops of cold sweat in shock, not expecting these wounds to actually be healed and repaired. I frowned in disbelief as my small hand crept up to his healed wound. At that moment, Whitey suddenly came forward intimately, and the little teardrops in the corners of my eyes seemed to be still. He actually stuck out his tongue to lick my tears, and I fluttered my eyelashes slightly and closed my eyes, indulging him in these temptations of mine. Only a trace of the White Emperor's wound was gone. It seemed that the teardrops in direct contact were more effective and the wound healed faster. Frosty Cloud's wee-colored cheeks were a little flushed as he kept praising me for being really good and for doing something so magical. I blinked my big innocent eyes, seemingly in complete disbelief that this scene was happening. Could it really be me? The White Emperor, however, whispered in my ear as he reminded me not to cry freely in the future or let anyone know that I had the power to heal. I of course nodded rapidly, and then sniffled my little nose again, looking like I understood perfectly. So while my tears have a healing effect, Whitey guesses that it's not just tears, it should be any part of my body. He suddenly lowered his head in serious contemplation. These may also include my tears, saliva, and flesh and blood. I listened attentively to the speculation with my hands on my chest. Like a very good white rabbit, Frosty Cloud was suddenly grim at this point, but he thought that if I was known to be able to heal, I would have been eaten without even a crumb of bone remaining. I didn't realize what the two of them were doing, but they secretly swore from this moment on that they must get stronger quickly in order to protect me. A figure suddenly appeared outside the cave, and with the dim light inside he launched into thought. The suspicion within Sung Ye didn't stop at this moment. The White Emperor's wounds were healing too quickly. It was too inexplicable. I didn't think he'd think of me again. After all, I was the only one who was there when it all happened. A few days later, with the help of the warm daylight of the last few days, came the negotiations between the Feather Clan and the Wolf Clan. Rock Wolf Clan Chief Frost Cloud was the first to appear, and he was followed by many of his own high-ranking sons and daughters. Feather Clan Chief Xin Yan followed closely behind, with significantly more companions following in his wake. Frost Cloud doesn't believe his side of the story. You stole first, and your little brats are all too spoiled. Shen Yan's face suddenly became extremely twisted. The revenge of the cubs Wei clan must be avenged. You call out the snake beast. This matter will be settled. Obviously Frost Cloud wasn't going to back down. The snake beast was a suitor for his female, and it didn't want to upset his young female. The Feather Clan patriarch was suddenly exceptionally angry, and immediately wanted to loudly reprimand the immediate start of the war. But he didn't act yet. The pain in his body caused him some heart-rending pain. Frosty Cloud's eyes narrowed in serious contemplation. It seemed that this leader of the Feather Clan's injuries were real, so it was no wonder that he would suddenly stop at the Rocky Mountain. So he asked the unthinkable question, "Are you planning to settle in Rocky Mountain?" Shen Yan secretly pondered. They no longer had much stamina. The Rocky Mountain top was the best place for them to look. Almost not give up. Frosty Cloud, however, suddenly smashed the boulder with a slap. Rocky Mountain is the territory of our Rock Wolf clan. If you want to live here, you first have to go through us. Then he crushed the stone in his hand. Seeing as you have lost your cubs, as compensation you can land at the top of the mountain. If you want to make trouble, we Rock Wolves are not easy to bully. Shen Yan was so furious that his blood churned, and inwardly he kept cursing this guy who took advantage of people's danger. At this time, a few small birds were flying in the air, and they kept patrolling around the cave at the top of the mountain. A large male foot suddenly appeared on the ground, and it quickly moved forward. Blood Plume touched his blood-red wings, but his tone couldn't hear any emotion. What? Being bullied by the Wolf Clan's patriarch? Shen Yan swished his head down. In the future, when he found the opportunity, he must teach that bastard a hard lesson. Blood Plume said that this incident was a lesson learned, and that Frost Cloud had been right about one thing. The clan had overprotected the cubs. Shen Yan, as the leader of the Feather Clan, would not allow others to resist, not even Blood Plume. Hasn't this incident warned you that if this goes on, the cubs will gradually lose their fighting ability? The Feather Clan patriarch, however, sighed in displeasure. In recent years, fewer and fewer females were able to lay bird eggs each year. The cubs were not easy to come by, and the clan had no choice but to love them so much. A cold aura flashed in the eyes of the Blood Plume. Even if a cub with no ability to survive survived, it would still be nothing more than a waste. Shen Yan felt that he was right, so he changed the topic again. I heard that you fell in love with a wolf little female and confessed to her in public. Only then did Blood Plume unfurl a genuine smile. He imagined me very angry. That little thing was indeed quite adorable. The Feather Clan chief was in the mood. So do you want to couple up and spawn quickly? Your cubs should be quite strong. Only to see the Blood Plume directly lifted his leg to give him a kick. Vicious voice then came. You also care too much. Since then, the Feather Clan and the Wolf Clan have been neighbors, and they have never interfered in each other's affairs. But both sides are still remembering the past, and there's no sign of improvement in their relationship. The Feathered Clan transformed into their own bodies and patrolled above, while not forgetting to use their small green bean eyes to glare viciously at the Wolf Clan below. The beastmen of the Wolf Clan were not vegetarians, and they also transformed into their own bodies, baring their teeth and roaring ferociously at them. Frosty Cloud, however, couldn't care less, and even hummed a song leisurely. Because it's harvest time lately, the latest batch of vegetables and fruits are ripe, and they're ready to collect the fruits when the bags are ready. Sang Night cut the sleeves off his shirt, revealing his two lean arms, which he thought would make it easier to, being the sweetest little female of all, am of course the first to come forward with compliments. It's very pretty and not surprising at all. Frosty Cloud was also raging for attention, so I had to compliment them along with the vegetable patches illuminated by sunlight, and the sweetheart's vegetables become round and round. I was taken aside to watch the dandelions, and they did not let me have any part in the work in the fields, but I quietly observed the three of them in action through the layers of dandelions, each one a ravishing presence. Of course, I'm also gradually becoming obsessed. It's not nice to look at them like this, but all three of them are so handsome. At that moment, a snake's tail passed in front of me, and I didn't even feel half scared. It turned out to be Sang Night using his own body, so worthy of being an orc, simple and brutal and effective. It was only after the sun gradually set, and the setting sun enveloped the entire heaven and earth, that Frosty Cloud wiped her face carelessly, finally done with collecting. I was in a good mood as I stared at all the vegetables in front of them, but to avoid attracting attention, I rubbed the ring in my hand, and it looked like it was time to put it away. So my look became serious, and I seemed no longer to be as droll as before, and decisively stretched out my finger to sweep the vast area. Vegetables that were just piling up are also enviable ingredients for them. With a bang, they all disappeared, and the ground became very tidy. Sang Night stood still in surprise. He didn't expect me to casually wave my hand. The mountain of fruits and vegetables had disappeared. I had to answer for the crowd. I have a ring with storage space in it, and I've got all the vegetables and fruits in it. Some images flashed inside Sang Night. The ring on my hand, by Dai and Frosty Cloud also wore it. Before I thought it was a love token. Now it seems to be not so simple. I was oblivious to his inner speculations, still holding the bags in my hands, and said that these could be taken back for dinner. But Sang Yo didn't follow me, so I could only yell at Sang Yo to hurry up again. But his head dripped down slightly, and his deep and affectionate eyes were slightly lost in the moment. The White Emperor, being the most sensitive-minded orc, sensed the change in him at the first opportunity, but did not say anything about it. Time was passing day by day, and soon it was time for the long-awaited market day. Our family went out again with fruits and vegetables, and set up a stall at the foot of the mountain to sell them. Sonia handed over the fruit in his hand, and I pleasantly reminded him to just leave it here. At that moment there was a noise in the distance, and I jerked my head up to look behind me. I didn't realize it was an old customer who had come to exchange food, but Winter's Tooth came with a kind of brotherhood, all carrying a huge amount of food in their hands. He unfolded all the herbs to us, and with a big, bold wave of his hand, "We'll take all the fruits you're selling this time." Whitey picked up a side of herbs from me, and I instantly gave a hard nod. This would work. So we gave herbs in one hand and vegetables in the other, and the two teams swapped happily. At that moment a male appeared, who embarrassedly took out the herbs in his hand, and offered to exchange them for some vegetables and fruits. A figure suddenly appeared in front of Frost Cloud, causing him to wonder a little how Booker could have come to just see him pick up the small bag in his hand. "We come to patronize your business. All vegetables and fruits are packed for him." Frosty Cloud, however, suddenly had some small interest. "You came here specially this time. You wouldn't have come just to buy some vegetables and fruits, right?" Booker chewed the vegetables in his mouth quickly. "There are two pieces of news to come to you. Hemp green seems to have been seen by an orc." Frosty Cloud was instantly aghast. His gaze suddenly became unusually fierce. Finally seeing Ma Ching, after the man found Ma Ching, he followed and never left, and Booker reported back with a serious look on his face. Finally it was found that Ma Ching had entered the Bee City, but the figure of that person was not found either. He seemed to have something important to do, and his black hat was so mysterious. Only his face showed a strange rune, and his eyes became very evil. Frost Cloud hugged his arms and kept making wild guesses about what exactly he was going to do when he went to the Bee City. Booker shook his head to indicate that he didn't know. Ma Ching had always been a very mysterious mission. No one knew where he came from. His position in the Black River Wolf clan was very special. Even the clan chief was quite scornful of him, and Bai Dai was curious as to which Bee City he had entered. It was only then that Red Fork remembered to report that the Bee City that Ma Ching had entered was called Dark Moon City. I couldn't quite hear it from the back. "But what is Dark Moon City again?" Sang Night sidled up and explained for me in a soft voice. Dark Moon City is one of the 3 middle cities. The Orc continent has a total of 10 Orc cities, 6 lower cities, 3 middle cities, and 1 upper city, which has also been made into the main city. Unless Ma Ching has the strength of a 3-star Orc, or has received special recognition from the Imperial Shrine of the Moon, he can enter the middle city. Frosty Cloud said, that he had people keep an eye on the outside of the city, and as soon as he saw Machin appear, he would notify them immediately. You said you wanted to see me for two things. What about the second? Booker realized with a jolt he seemed to have forgotten. Yesterday, a few very strange orcs came to the Black River tribe. They claimed to be divine ambassadors from the Dark Moon Shrine, coming to look for a serpentine beast named Sane Knight. My two little mates and I all fell silent, little drops of cold sweat breaking out all over our little faces. We then looked over to Sane Knight, and a small embarrassment suddenly appeared on my tiny head. My dice suddenly came to his senses. They were looking for that Sane Knight for something. Booker immediately shook his head again. They were very tight-lipped, and generally didn't communicate with us much, except to instruct us to do our work. If you see any snakes or beasts around here, you must be very careful and mind your own business. Sang Yo was very innocently holding a fruit basket on her head, holding a round vegetable in her hand on one side. Booker quipped, reminding them that a guy who could be targeted by the temple must be dangerous. Immediately afterwards he seemed to feel afraid, and kept begging the beast god to bless him, and never to meet that serpent beast. It wasn't until after Booker had completely walked away that the three of us looked at Sang Knight in the back. How did you get into trouble with the Dark Moon Divine Hall? Each of the 10 beast cities is equipped with a shrine. The Dark Moon Divine Hall was one of the 10 divine halls, but its strength was second only to the existence of the main city divine hall, and it was extremely powerful. There must be a deep conflict when the temple sends people after Sangyu. Sang Knight spoke with an expressionless face and replied, I stole the holy relics of the temple and killed the head priests. Frost Cloud was so shocked that he lost his voice. If what was stolen was a holy relic from the temple, it would be a great sin. He killed the chief priest. That's a crime on top of a crime. If he's caught, he'll be executed immediately. Sang Knight bowed his head without showing any expression. Don't worry, guys. This is his business. He alone can solve it. He'll get out of here before the God Emperor finds the Rocky Mountain, so it doesn't get them involved. I had to shout accusations at the man. I didn't realize that in your eyes. We are so greedy and afraid of death. We are a family. No one can die. Sang Yo said that I'm family with White Emperor Frosty Cloud, and there's no relationship between him and me. I was so angry that I wanted to go over there and talk to him. Now that the God Emperor hasn't come to our door yet, let's take this time so we can discuss a solution together. Let's make dinner first. So we all left the place and grabbed some food to eat. Sang Yo's eyes narrowed slightly as he kept thinking about what was coming next. He thinks I'm well taken care of by Whitey Frosty Cloud, and that he's the extra one for us. So he made the first decision that it would be better for him to get out of here as soon as possible. A pattering rain resounded outside, and small raindrops again and again slapped against the huge rocks. Sang Knight dragged himself out with a heavy body. After all, they were good to him. He definitely couldn't harm them. He even thinks that if he leaves, I'll be relatively safe. It was not until there was no more sound from the cave that he realized he had gone far, but his back looked incredibly lonely. So early the next morning, the pouring rain outside didn't stop. Frosty Cloud stepped over the hole and droned inwards. It rained so hard with last night. We'd better go and look in the ground. The White Emperor nodded thoughtfully. If the ground was flooded with vegetables, things would not be easy to handle. But then it suddenly occurred to me that Sangyan hadn't shown up, and that he'd slept in the room outside earlier. The White Emperor's pupils suddenly contracted violently, as if he had thought of something terrible. So we immediately flew to the outside room, and sure enough, there was no one on the bed. I trotted along close behind, but Whitey informed me quite clearly that Sonya had gone off on his own. But it's raining so hard outside. If we run into the god's messenger on the way, Sangyu will be in even more danger. No, I have to go out and look for him. Frosty Cloud, however, hurriedly shouted at me, You can't run around with such a weak constitution. Immediately after that, he grabbed me by the shoulders and used his words to tell me to put my heart down, that he would be able to help me find Sangyo. I looked up with great emotion. The last time Whitey left alone, Frost Cloud had assured me of the same thing, and had brought back Whitey. Although when I first met him, I only thought he was reckless and bad-tempered, but now he's getting more and more reliable. Baidai then interrupts the duo's little sweetness, and says he's going to tag along too. Frost Cloud suddenly mined a burst of conspiracy theories. White Emperor, this guy can never be enthusiastic people. How suddenly a perverse want to go to the snake beasts. Baidai said he'd go with Frost Cloud. If he really met any god's messenger, he'd have more chances of winning. After all, aren't we a family? A family has to work together. A wave of warmth rose up inside me. The White Emperor acknowledged Sonya as a family member. Frosty Cloud, however, sighed helplessly. Then we'll go together. After all, we're all family. Only to see Whitey suddenly kiss my cheeks and say that I should wait for them to return in peace. Frost Cloud suddenly transformed into a coyote and licked my cheeks affectionately, and said he wanted to kiss it as well. So he quickly gathered a bunch of his brothers and loudly reminded them to come with him to find Sang Yeo. The beastmen were inspired by the patriarch's encouragement, and all of them transformed into their own bodies and walked forward with angry eyes. The White Emperor also transformed into his own body, a supergiant and terrifying white tiger, and flew forward one step at a time. The two of them became the only emperor and issued a very serious and planned order to set out in search of Sang Yeo. When I saw them all out, I immediately turned round, with the intention of making some hot soup to ward off the cold, and waiting at home for them to return successfully. The heavy rain outside the cave seemed to be getting heavier and heavier, as if it showed no sign of abating at all. Countless raindrops fell on the tiny plants, and an ethereal and eerie sound resounded around them. A huge serpent's tail was the first to appear, and it took advantage of the rain to slither across the ground. Sure enough, it was Sang Yeo who had actually come to this place, and he had even transformed into a half-beast, half-human state, with an evil look on his face, waiting to attack. These several divine messengers were actually unlike normal people. One was actually incomparably terrifying, and their eyes were filled with disdain for him within their eyes. Only a few hissing sounds could be heard, and the several orcs that were just in human form had turned into several giant pythons. Sang Knight was stunned for a moment, not expecting that the divine ambassadors who had come to chase him had actually arrived so quickly. He suddenly slapped his hands violently against the water. After all, it was too close to the Rocky Mountains. It was better to distract them first. But his big tail was wandering behind him, and the pythons were already approaching with red eyes. Suddenly, several pythons twisted together in an instant, and the strength of several people was actually on par with Sang Knight's. Sang Knight opened his mouth fiercely, but there were too many people on the other side, so he couldn't break free. At that moment, a giant python of a different color opened its bloody mouth and bit into Sang Knight's hard body with a plop. Son Yu could only cry out in secret that it was bad. The teeth of these snakes were all highly poisonous. With his instinctive movements, he slapped the water haphazardly, but he could not free himself from the... It wasn't until the venom gradually rose to his brain that his consciousness began to blur. Another different colored python poofed another bite and was accompanied by a warning from them. Son Yu bound and ready. Unexpectedly, a white tiger came riding on the waves, like a hero to save him, and rushed forward without appearing to be afraid at all. Immediately after that, the White Emperor resounded with a roar, an oppression that belonged to the Emperor of the animal world. He actually rushed forwards unwillingly, biting fiercely into the torso of a shaped python, and its body immediately resounded with a zipping sound. Of course, the python couldn't bear this kind of pain, and for a while, the snake's letters were swinging wildly. Frost Cloud stood at the back and issued a call to arms. He had the clansmen take up their positions one after another, thus quickly surrounding them. The wolf crowd was of course very obedient, and the little paws moved quickly into formation, only to see the white tiger biting a python and not letting go. The rest of the black wolves surrounded them, and for a while the scene was chaotic. Whitey suddenly dragged Sonia's torso out quickly in a chaotic repose. Sang Knight quickly transformed into his human state. His angular face had fallen into unconsciousness. His body was almost entirely covered with no marks, and there seemed to be no part of him intact at all, and the venom prevented him from waking up fast enough. Bai Dai easily carried him on his shoulder. Brother, you have to hold on. This will take him back to be treated. But Son Yu wouldn't be taken away so easily, and behind him, several shaped pythons were furious and shouted at him to put him down. Whitey was carrying a sick man on his back, so we had to quickly call out to the reliable Frost Cloud. Frosty Cloud said that this was on his home turf, and as the clan leader, he would definitely break these little snakes into pieces. His small claws quickly slapped downwards, using a supreme must-have move, and suddenly the lake was still instantly flouncing. Several alien pythons had no time to break free, and actually quickly sealed them under the rock and ice, not giving them a chance to relax at all. Still, Frost Cloud was a little panicked. After all, his eyes couldn't stay flouncing for long, and there was a swamp ahead of him where he had to rush to get to. Bai Dai carried the injured Sang Yi to the rear, but his voice calmly expressed understanding. Then Frost Cloud played up his bitchy look and waited for them to struggle out, and started yelling at them for being stupid. Frost Cloud is walking against the light at the moment, and he's diverting all the threats to himself. As expected, the several alien pythons behind him had long been enraged and had lost their independent thinking. Frost Cloud looked ahead to a large swampy area, but inside he finally seemed to relax for a moment. Then, he was looking at the White Emperor and the others. It seemed that everything was under control. It was now. His claws flashed with a few flashes of light and danced with his movements. Without looking back, he stepped inside the swamp, the ice underneath him keeping him from sinking into it. Bai Dai followed behind him carrying Sang Yi, and they all stepped inside the swamp at once. These alien pythons seem to have lost their minds and are actually unaware of the impending danger. Frosty Cloud, however, secretly poked and smiled back in triumph, his mouth revealing a few icy words. "It seems that you really fell for it." Immediately after that, he slapped his little paw so hard that the ice underneath the ground began to break up rapidly. Several of the alien pythons swung their bodies frantically, but they couldn't resist the carcasses that kept sinking in. Frost Cloud and the others just waited silently in place until the pythons were down to one ugly head. It was only then that Wai led them in with the intention of going home, and of course the wolves behind him couldn't stop cheering. Outside, the sky was brightening, and the heavy rain had ceased because of their victory. I looked out of the cave in panic. The White Emperor, Frosty Cloud, and the others had finally returned, but Sang Neo wasn't in the best of shape. Bai Dai carried the men and thoughtfully explained to me that Sang Knight had been hit by the venom of a poisonous snake and had to be detoxified quickly. Sun Yu's lips were already close to purple, and the wounds on her body were simply shocking. It was only after I took a closer look that I realized he was deeply poisoned, and I guessed that ordinary herbs couldn't save him. Frost Cloud stated that after all, he had fought to the death to save him, and this snake beast had to be saved for him. I thought as they did, and quickly drew out a small dagger, and very often by very means. I think I took a knife and cut myself on the palm of my hand, and in such a tense moment, I seemed to forget the pain in my hand. I quickly brought the bowl aside and used it to catch my slowly flowing blood. Whitey suddenly took the little bowl in my hand and said that he could go forward and feed him. Frosty Cloud, on the other hand, became unusually dependable and did not utter a single word, but his big hands lifted Sang Yu's body early on. The two of them worked together marvelously, and Sang Yin drank in a strange position. Frost Cloud's little eyes immediately widened when she saw the rapid healing changes in his body. Sang Yu's eyes snapped open and widened as the changes within his body made him feel sick. He sat up straight in a hurry, then coughed up a few drops of black blood in agony. I relaxed a little at this point. It's good to get the poisonous blood out. Sang Yu's consciousness gradually woke up. He couldn't figure out why we were here. He had obviously left the rocky mountain quietly. After you left, he and Frosty Cloud went out to look for you, and saw that you were tangling with snake beasts. We saved you and brought you back home. Sang Yu knew clearly that it was me who woke him up, so there was a sudden change in his cool eyes. He clearly perceived the moving of his heart, which was beating wildly because of these people, but he was still paranoid that no one should have to help in this matter, and why they should have saved him. Of course, I answered him noncommittally because we are family. Sang Ya stated that she and I were not mates, and that there was no relationship between us. Frosty Cloud's irascible temper surged up. We went through so much effort to save you, and now you're skimming off the top with us. I stared at the man with some sadness. It looks like you're still leaving, right? I quietly hid my wrist under the cloth, but it was still seen by Sang Ye, who realized that I had saved his life. He just tilted his head to the side in a twisted manner. He didn't have anything to do with them, and staying here was just causing them trouble. I loudly reminded this paranoid man that we don't think you're going to get us into trouble. The White Emperor also suddenly counseled him. You should understand, we all consider you as a family member. Sang Ye doesn't care what they think. He only cares about what he thinks, and he's not my family. Then he showed a hint of sadness and begged the crowd to let him go. In my mind, he's become my mate, so of course I can just watch him get out. If he goes out like this, those God's ambassadors who are after him would definitely not let this opportunity go again. Bai Dai also had a moment of hesitation. Really let him leave like this? I secretly clenched my teeth in unpleasant thoughts. If I let him out today, he will only end up dead. So I loudly stopped Sang Ye ahead of me, and my tiny body flew towards his side. Of course Sang Ye wouldn't turn me down, and soon he looked back over his shoulder. Instead, I took him by the collar and moved forward in a domineering and irritating manner. I proved it with my own practical actions, and I pressed my little mouth intimately against it, only to pray that the man would not leave. It wasn't until the kiss was over that I realized my impulsiveness, but seeing the shocked look on Sang Yao's face, it was as if this moment had been worth it. I've already kissed you. You'll be mine from now on. Now you still have the nerve to say you have nothing to do with me.